The Still Owning podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Gilmer, Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Matt aka Stormageddon, Stephen P, Ryan K, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, we finally finish off Master D. Wait, they put this in the kids' game? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, it is the finale of Punch Nazi Month, punching some goddamn Nazis right in the mush. We're finishing them off in style, as it were. We, in fact, what we find out about this game that we're covering is that while in America, it may not have been about Nazis, but it kind of was. But actually very much was, and we'll talk all about that. I'm kind of being a little obtuse, but those who know this game know what I'm talking about. And I have two people here today who know this game very well. We are, of course, talking about Bionic Commando, and joining me, we're going to kick it off to a returning guest. First time on for a regular episode. This guest has been on my Still Bonding show over on Patreon. They were also on over at the Super Mario Fantasy Draft for episode 300. But now they're joining me for a very, just a straightforward game deep dive. Joining us now is Diamond Feit from the Retronauts podcast. Diamond, how are you doing today?
Bionic Feit. Ooh. Hello, this is Diamond Feit. And that's right. I made a Bionic 6 reference in 2025. Who else? Who else hears me? That's like lost media at this point.
Well, I'm glad you could be here. I mean, it was lost to me. I'll be honest. I didn't reference.
Again, I don't know. That show has got. I don't know. Yeah, that's gone.
Hey man, I will take any obscure media references that I can. Gives me something else to look up and learn about. But yeah, I'm happy to have you on, Diamond. It's been a minute since you've been on the show. The last time you were on was over a year ago for the Super Mario Fantasy Draft. So it's been a year, and I'm happy to have you back on the show.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't want to point any fingers, but you got my number. Fault. You got my number. You want me on the podcast, you got to, push the buttons and say, hello, Diamond, come to podcast. I have
some other ideas.
I've tried the inverse. I've tried going on the podcast to say, hello, let me on, and it does not work. Doesn't work.
Oh, you just have to ask me. I'm desperate for people. I'll take just about anyone. Not saying that you're anyone. You're an esteemed guest, but
We're on the air here. We're on the air here. You sure you want to say that out loud?
Well, and speaking of taking just about anyone, no, I'm joking. The new and first time guest to the podcast, someone who's actually, it's been a long time coming. I've been trying to get him on the show for quite some time, and it's been my fault that it has not happened. But we are here today to rectify that, to correct it. Joining us now is Chris Baines from the YouTube channel Rewind Arcade. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and my head is exploding with excitement for this episode.
Whoa. Hey, slow down.
This is a children's...
If I can get past Nintendo censors.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if you can get past Nintendo censors. Oh, man, we got so much to talk about with this. Yeah. Man, I'm excited to have you on. I was going to have you on for Metroid, and then it just kind of ended up falling through, and there's a reason for that. It's a whole behind the scenes thing that's not really worth bringing up here.
Wait, did you do a Metroid episode?
No. So long ago, I did one before, like, I knew you, before, like, it was early on in the podcast, and I'll be honest, it's not good. It's not a good episode, and I do plan on redoing it. And I had a whole idea in mind about it, but I'll tell you more about it off mic at some point.
Not to sidetrack us already.
No, it's fine. So yeah, I'm excited to have you on, and we are here, of course, talking about Bionic Commando, wrapping up Punch-a-Nazi month to talk about Bionic Commando. And I guess as we should start off with personal experiences, as we always do. And normally I would go over to my guests, but as I think, yeah, same with Wolfenstein 3D and this one, I had little to no experience with this game. I mean, I've heard about Bionic Commando. Obviously, I've played it a little bit before this, and spoiler alert, I did not get to beat it in preparation for this episode because it's a tough game. At least for me, it's a tough game for me. But kind of doing a little bit of a dive into, watching it, a full playthrough of it, and just researching on it, I have more opinions on it that maybe that it's more about me. Maybe the difficulty is more about me than the game, and I'll elaborate more on that when we get into discussion. So, yeah, my experience with this game is zilch, basically nothing. It's just preparation for this. So I want to throw it over to my guests. Diamond, we'll start off with you. I actually reached out to you because I saw on Blue Sky that you listed this as one of your favorite games. So I just kind of talk about your experience with it.
Well, as I recall, I saw the arcade game in passing. It was not one of my regular cabinets, but I knew of it, and it intrigued me because it's not a game about jumping, but a game about swinging and grappling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm pretty sure once I saw there was a decent sized spread in Nintendo Power about the NES game. So when I saw that one, I was like, oh, well, this looks good. So when the game came out, I, tracked it down, which would have been sometime in 88. And I got it home and I was super into it. It's the game, it's kind of a funny Nintendo game in that it arrived post Zelda and everything. So it could have had some sort of save feature, but it doesn't. So whenever you play this game, you have to play it from the start, at least, on original hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So it just became a game where it's like I would sit down and I'd play it and I'd see how far I could get. And then once I knew how to beat it, then that just became a thing. Okay, well, let's beat Bionic Commando today. And I would sit down and I'd beat it. And then I'd, go back to eating cookies or whatever I did in middle school. So, and it really stuck with me. It's a game that had a long tail for me, almost in part because there isn't really there weren't a lot of follow-ups for a very long time. I don't know if we want to get into the franchise as a whole, but this game kind of came out and made a big splash, and then that was kind of it for a very long time, with periodic exceptions of like, oh, here's a Game Boy version, here's a Game Boy Color game that's not really based on anything, and then many years later, like, here's a remake. Oh, okay, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it seems like this game, what's interesting to me about this game is that it feels like the mechanic that we're talking about with the swinging mechanic, it feels like, I mean, maybe either of you can think of games that were in that kind of directly steal this mechanic, but it feels almost like an evolutionary dead end in gaming. Not in that means it's a bad thing. It's just more like I haven't seen a game. There wasn't a game like this prior to Bionic Commando. There was obviously influences, and Chris, I know you'll probably talk about that when we get into the history with it. But with this specific idea of this game and the swinging mechanic, I don't think I really have seen a other game that implements it in this way. There wasn't one before it, and I don't think I've seen one since. Would you guys agree with that? Have you seen any other games other than other Bionic Commando games that have mechanics like this?
I mean, games have definitely borrowed the grappling mechanic, but I don't think it's ever really been the core gameplay mechanic in anything that I can think of.
Grappling hooks are hard, I think, because either you have them sort of rigid, which in this game it is very rigid. Like you shoot you shoot your grappling hook at very specific angles and you can do very specific things, but the entire environment and world and, moment to moment gameplay is built around that,
Mm-hmm.
Or you have games where you have a grappling hook and it does something, but it's like one tool of many. And I'm thinking of, well, on Retronauts, we recently talked about Axiom Verge because it just turned 10. And
Mm-hmm.
Axiom Verge has a ton of different things you can do. But at one point, you get a grappling hook, and it basically functions like the Bionic Commando grappling hook, which is very good. But also, you don't need it expressly, except for maybe a couple situations. Whereas, there's lots of other things you could do to get to high places or just like dash around and things. I'm also reminded of I don't want to say obscure, but relatively small from a fan base standpoint, a game called, oh God, Kawase. Oh my God, I forgot the name of the. It's
You
a
can look it up
Japanese
if
name.
you'd like.
Hang
What was
on.
it for? What console? Is it like a newer game or?
No. It's an old game. It's Umihara Kawase. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I blanked on the name. Please cut some of that out so I appear less stupid. But Umihara Kawase was originally a Super Famicom game that was never released abroad. There were later sequels, and I think compilations have since come out, so you can probably buy it these days if you want. But that's a game that's very much about grappling, in that you're a little girl with a fish hook, and it's very much a platforming challenge, and it's not really about action at all because the enemies are giant, like they're all like seafood, and it's more about like getting around them and occasionally capturing them, but really it's just about exploration and like how good can you get at this thing that you latch onto and like propelling yourself and preserving your motion. So it's a very interesting game that is not really like Bionic Commando, but if you love Bionic Commando, you might want to play that and see what it's really about if you want to like, get good at it.
And I feel like games that came out shortly after, like similar to Umihara Kawase, there's Castlevania 4 obviously had like the swing mechanic in 91, and then Super Metroid with the grapple in 94, which obviously are not quite the same as Bionic Commando mechanically, like the way they play, but it's still, you have to wonder if there was some inspiration that was
I would assume so. I was thinking more along the lines of like you were saying, Chris, where the core mechanic of the game, the core gameplay loop is that grappling hook. But I guess there really hasn't been a lot that kind of understandably so, because it's a very niche thing. But before we go any further down this rabbit hole, because I feel like we could continue talking about this, I want to throw it over to you, Chris, to get your personal experiences and your personal history with Bionic Commando.
Well, Bionic Commando is my favorite NES/Famicom game of all time. I wouldn't say it's the best NES or Famicom game, but it is my favorite. It's one of those games I can just play whenever. I just love it. It's just so much fun, and it is a comfort food video game for me. And it's funny because I never owned it as a kid. My friends all had it. I always played it at their house constantly, but I never actually owned it as when you were a kid, like you didn't have a lot of money, so it was like if your friends all had it, you could play it at their house. You wouldn't waste that that game for that being able to purchase that one game for your quota, I guess. But I remember being at a church buddy's house. I think this is in like 89 or 90, and we finished the game there. And the ending just blew our minds. We were both like screaming and running around the room, just like freaking out because we had never seen anything like that in an NES game. So it's definitely just a very memorable game to me, and just a game that I can pick up and play at any time and just have a blast with.
That's awesome. I can only imagine, especially as like, as a fellow church kid myself growing up, like playing a game like this where you just blow. Spoiler alert for the game, and we'll go into it in more detail as to why this is a thing in this game. But at the end of the game, what Chris is talking about, you just blow up Hitler's head in one of the most violent like visuals you'll ever see, arguably the most violent visual you'll ever see on the NES. I'm not as well versed in NES games to say that there's one more violent, but it's pretty freaking violent. It's
definitely top
it's
three.
Gross.
It's especially alarming because when we talk about the game, we're going to talk about the changes that were made. This game came out in Japan first, and then came to America, and they made a lot of changes to comply with Nintendo of America's, rather far-reaching, what do you call it, content guidelines, if you will. So
their censorship shenanery.
Yeah. I try to avoid that word if possible, just because, like, especially now in 2025, we're seeing what actual censorship in America looks like, where like people are getting fired from their jobs. Yes. But certainly in the, in the marketing censorship kind of standpoint, like this game had a form, it went through localization, it went through, expurgation, and it came to American shores. But in that process, they decided, you know what? This incredibly graphic shot of Hitler's head exploding, that's okay. We're keeping it.
It
This
was
is
so
a-okay.
weird. It was so weird for back then. Just such a bizarre piece of history because, like, yeah, everything else was just kind of completely just neutered to heck. It was just you really couldn't have anything in these games that were that was like even remotely past PG. And so for that to kind of like make it past everything else, all the localization changes is just ridiculous. It's just it was something that was very surprising back then.
Yeah, and I want to shout
I
out, I don't know if it's still available, but a few years ago, Nina Matsumoto made a t-shirt for Fangamer that's a Bionic Commando theme t-shirt, and I never pulled the trigger on it because the entire image is Hitler's head exploding.
oh my god.
So it's just like, it's an awesome, I put a link to it in our little chat here. You can Google it if you want to Google it. It'll come up really quickly. And like, it looks awesome. And I wasn't sure if I could ever potentially wear it in public because it's really nasty. But
Maybe
I love it. I love it as a
oh my
concept.
god.
I have a pin of the sprite on my back. It's like a giant pin on my backpack that I walk around with. Not quite as crazy as a t-shirt, but I've definitely got a few. I don't know about disgusted glances, but like, oh, what is this on your backpack that you're wearing in public?
You could totally, like Nina's design, you could totally wear that at like a metalcore show. It looks like it would
Oh
be a
yeah.
band's t-shirt, right? Like that is the font and everything is very much like a metalcore band's t-shirt, and even the design, because they always have kind of like grotesque things on it.
Hmm.
Now, what to your point, Chris, where you're saying like how like it's just weird that like, well, both of your points actually, like why did this get past censors and not censors? Why did this get past Nintendo, right? How did this get past Nintendo? I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't. So this is from the same era as like, when did Maniac Mansion on the NES come out? Right?
I think it was 90.
Was it 90?
I think it was like
I'll
late
look it up
89
real
or
quick.
90. I mean, other things made it through.
Wow. So here's what's at 90 in North America. You were right, Chris, but 88 in Japan.
Yeah.
On NES. On NES.
Oh, Maniac.
88.
Okay, 88. No. Okay, sorry. I thought it was a little later.
No, but in 90 it came out in North America on the NES, but in Japan it came out in 88. It's interesting, according to Wikipedia, mind you. Now, the reason I bring up Maniac Mansion, I had a couple years ago, I had on. Yes, the hamster. You've heard about this then. I think I told you about this.
I played through it at Maniac Mansion. I remember this like kind of scarring me as a child.
Well, so the thing is with that, years ago on the podcast, I want to say 2 years ago, I'm going to have to find the episode specifically, but I had a guy on, and I feel awful that I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but he was the president of Jollyco USA. Howie Rubin, that's his name, Howie Rubin. He actually worked at Atari Coin Op back in like the 70s, and then he ended up working as the president of Jollyco USA, and Jollyco is the company that ported or published, I should say, Maniac Mansion on the NES. And he told a story on the episode about how they didn't tell Nintendo about that hamster, that infamous hamster scene that any Maniac Mansion fans, you know what we're talking about. And what happened was, excuse me, what happened was they sent it off to Nintendo. It got approved, and they ordered like however many 100,000 copies of the game. Back in the day, for those who aren't aware of Nintendo's business practices from the 80s, you had to buy all your cartridges from Nintendo. So it's not like you could get it approved on their store and then find some other way to manufacture it or this and that, or find a cheaper option, or obviously there was no digital storefront. You had to do everything through Nintendo. So you had to buy cartridges from them and whatnot. And because of that, they ordered off however many 100,000. While those cartridges were still on a freighter over to the United States to eventually be sold, they get a call from they get a call from the president of Nintendo America, or so I forget exactly who, and they say, "Hey, it's Nintendo. We found the hamster. Like, you can't sell these games." And so Howie, being the smart businessman what he was, said, "Hold on a moment. I'm going to call you back." And then he hung up, called his lawyer to make sure that the contract, he understood the contract he had with Nintendo clearly. And essentially the contract made it out to be that unless he signs for those games, he does not officially own them. So he called Nintendo back and said, "Okay, I can't sell these. That's fine, but I'm not going to sign for them. You have to tell me where you want me to send these back, because I'm not going to sign for them and make them my property if I can't sell them." And he played hardball with Nintendo. They were pretty pissed about it, but they ultimately caved, and he was allowed to sell the game as is, but under the condition that if they needed another print run, that they would have to remove the hamster from those later prints, which they did have another run, and they did remove the hamster from from other cartridges. So that's why that is why there's two different versions of Maniac Mansion on the NES, one with an exploding hamster and one with no exploding hamster. So I say that whole long-winded story to bring it back to Bionic Commando. I don't think Nintendo played far enough into the game to really check for stuff like that.
Well, even in some of Nintendo's games, if you look at the Kid Icarus manual from 1987, I think it came out over here, there are exposed breasts from like a siren or a harpy. I was just like, even they weren't like checking all of their stuff, which is kind of crazy to me.
That's just so surreal.
It's very wishy-washy. It was a very Wild West time back then, and I feel like, where just, they caught what they could. Like, they had a net out and they caught everything they could. But a lot, like, not a lot, but like some little things kind of slip through the cracks, even with their own games.
And you know what? Let's use that as a quick segue to talk about this game's localization. There's a lot of history behind this game, and I'll throw it over to you, Chris, and Diamond. If you have anything you want to interject with, feel free to. Because I guess, just right off the top here, listeners, if Chris hadn't been on the episode, I would have been essentially reciting research that he already did. On Rewind Arcade's YouTube channel, he has an amazing documentary about the history of Bionic Commando. He did a lot of research on it. Very much worth checking out. I will include a link to this in the show notes, as well as a link to the shirt that Diamond sent us. I need listeners to see that picture.
I need that shirt.
It's so wild.
I don't know if they still sell it, but it's the design is public, certainly.
That's very awesome.
You can look at it.
Yeah.
In the original version of this game, you were in the Japanese version of this game, and I'm just doing a bare bones overview of the localization right now. You were fighting Nazis. In fact, the actual original name of it was Resurrection of Hitler Top Secret. And because I believe, what was it? The original Bionic Commando, when it was the arcade version, was just called Top Secret, correct?
Yes. So,
yeah. Sorry,
I'd love to go back.
You can just go into it. I feel like the localization leads right into this.
Well, I feel like it's important to talk about kind of like where it came from before then, because the localization really is the most fascinating part of Bionic Commando's like history of why it's so different from pretty much any other video game series out there. And I'll just kind of walk through this, and we can kind of like just talk about it. I'm not going to like go like deep into it, but I mean, it kind of, everything starts off in 1983 with Tokuro Fujiwara, who is the creator of the game, and he also did Ghosts and Goblins, creator of the Resident Evil series. So he's a pretty big deal. But he created a game at Konami called Rocket Rope, which was an arcade game. I don't know. Have you guys played Rocket Rope?
That's a game I've never even heard of until I started digging to Bionic Commando many years later, where I was like, oh, wow. So this really was a thing that he just wanted to try again.
Essentially, yeah. So like he was really upset when he did Rock and Rope because the hardware limitations, like he had a lot of ideas that he wanted to do, like swinging, that couldn't really be, they couldn't make it happen on Konami's arcade boards. So he kind of like, obviously Rock and Rope came out. It was a success, and his ideas though, like a lot of them had to be scrapped. So he kind of, I guess, like bundled them up and saved them for a rainy day. And then he leaves Konami after that. He's headhunted by Capcom in I think either late '83 or early '84. He releases Capcom's very first game, Vulgus. And then in 1985, he does his like first like big game, which is Senjo no Okami, and that's the name in Japan, but you might know it better as Commando. I assume you guys have probably heard of or if not played Commando before.
Oh yes, oh yes. I'm not good at it, but I've played it.
Yeah, that one was gigantic. Couldn't escape that one, and I'm pretty sure I either had it on NES or at least played it on NES extensively.
Yeah, it was crazy. Very, very big. It was like their second, I would say it's Capcom's second major success after 1942, but 1942 took a while to kind of catch on. So like Commando was really, really big in the West. And in Japan, in Senjo no Okami, the protagonist that you play as does not have a name. He is nameless. But when they localized it for over here as Commando, they gave the protagonist a name, and that name is Super Joe. So that's kind of where everything with Bionic Commando, I feel like, in terms of like how this weird Western influence, that's kind of where all that starts.
It's also it's funny to me that it's 1985, so it's like, oh, we have a American soldier here. What's his name? Well, obviously his name is Joe because it's G.I. Joe is still huge in 1985. So yeah.
Absolutely. And Commando was probably even bigger in the West than it was in Japan, but it was still a success in both regions. And then in 1986, Fujiwara releases another game called Russian Crash, and when it was brought to the West, the title was changed to The Speed Rumbler, and it's a post-apocalyptic car combat shooter. It's kind of similar almost to Commando, but once more the localization team names the protagonist, which is unnamed in the Japanese version, to Super Joe. So Super Joe appears again in another one of Fujiwara's arcade games in '86. I don't know if you guys have played that.
That's another one I have not heard of before, but I do think it's funny that there's clearly a trend here of Capcom USA really hoping to get some kind of mascot or character with a name that they can latch onto, because if you think about it, within a couple of years, I don't know when they start doing this, but in the American manuals for NES games, they start including the Captain Commando character that they made up for the US brand.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
He's in the manual for Bionic Commando.
Oh yeah. He's definitely there. He's by 88, he's there. I don't know when he started, but he's definitely there. And in Mega Man 87, he's in there. And, this all predates the actual Captain Commando with a game that comes out, I want to say in 90 or 91. So clearly Capcom USA really wanted to have a name and a face to sort of hang their hat on, probably because they looked at Mario. It's like, hey, Mario's huge. Who's our Mario,
Absolutely, yeah. I think that they wanted a face to put next to like the Capcom logo that they could market. And I think, yeah, obviously that Super Joe was what they were kind of trying to, I guess, force almost on these Japanese titles that were being localized.
Which I wonder if like even the super descriptor is from Super Mario, right? Like, well, they have Super Mario, we're gonna have Super Joe.
Yeah, and Mario was like instantly became Nintendo's mascot almost overnight. I feel like with the success of Super Mario Brothers, like he was in all of their sports games and just had cameos everywhere.
It's very possible. I wonder what the timeline is, because I believe Commando as an arcade game predates Super Mario Brothers. But
March of 85, I believe.
But by the time they're doing home conversions and US like translations, maybe Super Mario Brothers is already a known thing. So it's possible.
Yeah, definitely. No, I feel like Commando came out on the Famicom in I think 87.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100%. So it was later, because Capcom didn't really have their home console division until a year or two after they had really kind of infiltrated the arcades, and that was like Fujiwara was like trying desperately to stay with the arcades, and the Capcom like heads, like upper management, kind of pushed him into the console. So he was overseeing a lot of these things later on, like the Rockman game, Mega Man games, and Bionic Commando and everything.
Yeah, the early arcade to Famicom ports were handled by third parties, and the quality is very spotty. It's kind
very
of
questionable.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Some of them are serviceable. Like I would argue that Ghosts and Goblins, which is another Tokoro Fujiwara game. Like,
Yep.
if you play the NES version, like, that's pretty close, but it
I think
also,
it's all right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's got some deficiencies, but like it's pretty close. Like, as kids, I remember playing that a lot, and like, okay, like in my mind, this is similar enough to the arcade game that I don't care. But other games that got to translated were just not translated, ported. Other games suffered a lot. So by the late 80s, Capcom was just porting stuff themselves, which I think informed their decision to sort of like, okay, well, what if instead of just porting them, we sort of revamp them and explore new ideas in the home versions, which you see in a lot of games before Bionic Commando, like Gunsmoke or 1943, which are very much like, okay, here's our arcade game on a home system, but we tweak things. We really think about, okay, what does it mean to play this game at home versus play it in an arcade where you got to put coins in all the time? And I think that really informs the decisions in a lot of ways that make not Gunsmoke, Bionic Commando on home so different than the arcade game.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that Capcom kind of realized, I think a lot of companies were kind of coming to terms with arcade and video and home console games are not the same thing. Like, it was kind of a very like bumpy transition, but yeah, companies like Capcom, I feel like Diamond just said, were really kind of reinforcing that idea that these arcade games were cool, like, in arcades, they were fun on home consoles still, and they sold pretty well, but they weren't, with I guess these experiences, people were kind of starting to want like larger and more in-depth experiences, and like with 1943 from Capcom, which had like the whole power-up system implemented, and just a lot of those games were adding these like extra layers of depth and extra content on top of their arcade counterparts.
I mean, it kind of necessitated it just because when you're in arcade, like, you don't have a lot of time to grasp the gameplay, so you kind of have to keep the gameplay a little bit more simplistic because the quarter munching and whatnot. In this, you have nothing but time, so like you're going to make game by nature of it. I would assume they would just make games more and more complex in a good way to kind of compensate for that.
Yeah,
definitely.
And also, let's not forget, 1987 is also the year. Wait, is it 87 or 86? No, 86, sorry. In 1986 is when Dragon Quest first appears in the Famicom.
Mm-hmm.
And that obviously has a huge impact.
Changes the game.
Yeah. And suddenly every game wants to have quote-unquote RPG elements, which I would say, it's less a factor in Gunsmoke, but like Bionic Commando on Famicom and NES definitely has RPG elements in that there's a sort of unseen experience.
Like growing.
Yeah, there's like there's a growth process that happens. Like the longer you play and the more time you put into the game, the stronger you get, even if it's not a matter of literally experience points. But like that's how the game functions.
Exactly. So in '87, to build on that, Fujiwara decides he wants to make a follow-up to Rock and Rope. He wants to build on those ideas and kind of like now that technology has progressed, build on those ideas that were scrapped for the game. Obviously, he can't make Rock and Rope 2, so he makes a new title called Top Secret, or as you know it better, Bionic Commando, which that is where this whole thing starts. This is the first Bionic Commando game, and this is exclusively an arcade game. Have you guys played the original Bionic Commando? Diamond, I heard you said you did. I don't know about if you played it, Josh.
No. I have. So this era of gaming is something I will always be endlessly fascinated by, but have very little original, like firsthand original experience back when it was contemporary.
Okay, Diamond, did you play it in arcades, like in the actual machine?
I definitely did, but it was not one of those games I played very often. It was like the game it's one, how like in the arcade era, like you only can play what you find, right? And some games, maybe you saw them on vacation and then you spent like the next 4 or 5 years of your life trying to remember what they were. I very vividly remember seeing Strider on a trip to Coney Island and looking at the attract mode of Strider and like, oh my God, what is this game? And then like a couple years later, it came out for
Genesis?
Yeah, for Genesis. And I was like, oh my God, it's that game I saw on Coney Island. I gotta have it. So like Yeah, Bionic Commando was like a weird game. I think I saw on vacation somewhere, and it just ran around my mind a little bit. Like, oh yeah, it was this really weird thing. And then the NES ad came out. I was like, oh okay, so they're making a version of that. Cool.
Yeah. And it's similar to Rock and Rope where you can't jump, but you can pull yourself up and you can like shoot out your arm and swing across gaps or over obstacles. You can use it to stun enemies. So it's the bionic arm is really just a the main mechanic that the whole game is built around, and it's kind of the stage design is set up in a way that it works really really well. And I've just played the arcade game recently. I did not grow up with it. I did not play it when I was younger, but I like it. I don't think it's as good as the later games, but I appreciate it for what it is. And I don't know if you guys how you feel about it.
I don't have much, like I said, I don't have much experience with it. Yeah, from what I have seen of it, it just feels very much. It's just I don't want to say just another arcade game because it obviously kind of reinvent, like it really kind of added a new gameplay type or a type. You know what I'm trying to say? Like this mechanic you didn't really see in arcades prior to that, so it's really cool what it added to it. But I don't know, arcade games have always been something, unfortunately, that has just passed me by because by the time I wasn't allowed to have games for a long while growing up, so I missed a lot of like I'm old enough where I could have played the NES, but I missed out on it. And so because of that, I also missed out on a lot of arcades. There also really just wasn't any arcades near me. So unfortunately, arcade games, everyone I see is just kind of like, oh, this is just fine. And that's not an indication of the game's quality. It's just more, I didn't get to experience it, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I said, I think it's a fun game, but I feel like they really perfected it later on with the follow up. But so when they brought Top Secret over to the West, the game was retitled obviously to Bionic Commando, and it was presented as a sequel to Commando. So in Japan, the games have no relation whatsoever. They are completely different franchises, not even closely related. But over here, they named the protagonist once more to, you guessed it, Super Joe. So they tried to say, and in the marketing for the game, I believe it says Super Joe is now bionic. So they really just wanted to latch on to this character and start to connect these franchises together. So people that play Commando would be like, oh, well, I loved Commando, so I obviously have to play Bionic Commando.
I love in your documentary the way you describe the slow bleed over of the North American localization to the Japanese versions of the game as time progresses on. Like obviously there's no connection right now over in Japan, but
Yeah.
other than the fact of the developer, right? And so but like in North America, they have all these connections. They're trying to make Super Joe a guy, a thing. He's trying to be a thing. And I find it funny as the series goes on, just how there's like these small, like it just kind of slowly creeps over to the Japanese storylines as well, where Super Joe becomes the character eventually. It's just it's wild. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
I also find it interesting that when you look at Top Secret, original like marketing materials, the phrase they roll with is wire action game, and I feel like that's definitely, if that's Fujiwara, that's definitely playing on the whole Rock and Rope thing, because like in Rock and Rope, like you've got like a harpoon and you're just like this cable, and it's very much a thing. It's a tool you use, whereas in Top Secret, it seems like it's attached to you, but it's not really clear what like. Is it just something mounted on you, or is it something you're wielding? Like, is it a gun?
Attached to the arm?
Yeah.
It's attached to the arm. It's like a little like arm gun thing. It's not like replacing their arm, but
right.
Yeah.
But then as the game goes on and as different artists take on, at some point it becomes an arm, like a literal bionic arm, and that it is replacing your arm.
Yeah.
And like that's not the case early on, but somehow that becomes the case later on, and it's kind of a weird thing, and I don't know which, it's a kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Did they transform it because they decided, oh, bionic, so this is literally his new arm, or what? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's I don't know if there's an answer to that, but it's definitely one of those things that it definitely changes.
What confused me was the name Top Secret, because Val Kilmer is not in that game at all.
No.
Rest in
R.I.P.
peace. R.I.P. Val Kilmer. I love that movie. Side note, completely random tangent. That movie, I think, is an underrated classic. It's fantastic.
It is, truly.
One of the nice things about the last week or so is seeing how many people go on the internet just saying, "Hey, remember Top Secret?" Like, yes, I do remember Top Secret. It's a movie that should have been up there with Airplane and Naked Gun all this time. But yeah, I'm glad if people find it now, by all means, watch that movie. It's hysterical.
That's great. It's excellent.
It's such a good movie. Anyway.
Also, to just another note about Top Secret to Bionic Commando, the arcade game, when it was brought over, they completely edited the sprite to be less cutesy. So he's very, very very anime kind of cutesy looking in the Japanese version, but they edited the sprite to look more serious when they brought it over to the West, which I thought was a very interesting change.
Certainly the flyer, if you look at the Top Secret flyer, it's very much like big head, brightly colored hair, like the soldiers, but there's also like monsters, so it almost looks like I bet the same artist who did the Ghosts and Goblins art drew this art, probably.
I would agree. Yeah, that's
whereas the Bionic Commando art, both arcade and the NES version, that is absolutely like an action figure. Like someone drew a guy. Like here's a guy. He's got a gun. He's got this wrist-mounted, cable. He's surrounded by like soldiers and like mechs. Like it's not action. It's not a toy, but you feel like they want it to be a toy.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely very G.I. Joe-esque for sure.
With some Star Wars influence in there too, with those mech things. They almost look like AT-ATs.
Yeah, a little bit.
Sure, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, Revenge of the Jedi was what, 83? So
yeah. I feel like Star Wars has never stopped like influencing things throughout the 80s. Especially in Japan. But yeah, I guess even over this is more of a Western thing. So yeah, everywhere, I guess. So the next year in 88, this is probably the game we'll probably talk the most about, but Hitora no Fukatsu Topu Secreto released on the Famicom, and obviously that translates to Resurrection of Hitler, Top Secret. And this is actually a sequel to the arcade game. So it's not really a port. I mean, you could probably argue it either way, but technically it chronologically takes place 10 years after the events of the arcade game.
Well, you're rescuing the main character of the arcade game.
Yes, Super Joe from the original Bionic Commando or Top Secret gets captured, while the Nazis in this version are they're trying to build this super weapon, and he goes in there to stop the plans or steal the plans and stop the project, but he gets abducted. And the crazy thing about this is that the Japanese version of Top Secret adopts this name. They call him Super Joe in the Japanese version as well. So he takes this name that Capcom's USA marketing department gave him, and it is now placed on him for the Japanese version, which is kind of like the beginning of how all this starts to, you see this Western influence start to push its way into the Top Secret / Bionic Commando series, which is pretty crazy. And this is way bigger and better than the original game. They added a ton of new features. It's much larger. There's like Diamond was saying, there was a lot more like growth of your character powering up. Like you get stronger as you go on. You get new weapons. You get more hit points. It is very much that late 80s Capcom vibe of taking this arcade experience and really, really building on it.
Now, and what's crazy too is like this is I think what I love about this game, what I did play of it, even though, like I said, I wasn't very good at it. I know I'm kind of jumping a little bit because we still have to talk about the localization differences. But now that we're at this game, the thing that I really kind of admire about this game, and it's frustrating though, but I admire it, is its steep learning curve. I think this game is really hard to pick up, but once you do, it's really intuitive once you understand the controls and how they work. Because, at least from my experience, like because I'm so used to how like most other 2D platformers work, it was really hard for me to really figure out like how to control this game efficiently, right? Because it is so different. And
it's like looking at a
even
bike
what
as
is
a kid. Like
it's
looking at
like what's right? Yeah,
it's like when you're like a kid and you see people riding around on bikes, you're like, how the heck does anybody ride around on these two wheels and like stay up and ride around? It looks
yeah.
impossible as a kid, but like once you actually like start to do it, you're like, oh, well, this totally makes sense. This I totally get this. So that's how I would like it.
I gotta be honest. I'm in my late 40s and I still don't get it. Sorry, it still doesn't make sense to
Riding a
me.
bike or buying a commando?
No. Bionic Commando, I understand.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
there's two wheels. How does it stand? How does it stay up straight? It doesn't make sense to me. Still don't get it.
Gravity is a
Physics,
lie.
just I don't
No.
oh, no, but I think that's a good analogy though, Chris. Like it really is. It looks so tough at first just because of that, and the fact like you can't jump, which it completely goes against everything like muscle memory I've been trained to learn over the last like 30 plus years of gaming, right? Where I'm so used to having this jumping type of muscle memory and having some type of at least like it's like once you play like get used to like how most platformers play. If you've never played if you're trying out a new 2D platformer or a new 3D platformer after playing years of them, you generally can go through it, not saying it's necessarily easy, but like you don't have a hard time to control. Like I think of games like Celeste, where Celeste is a brutally difficult game, but like I didn't have that much trouble getting used to the mechanics at all because I've played tons of 2D platformers. Bionic Commando is not like that. Like what's interesting about Bionic Commando is the game itself, like once you get used to the mechanics, it's not outrageously difficult. It's still challenging, but it's like not it doesn't seem nearly as like fast paced as some others. They like there's lots of enemies that show up, but they fall slowly. You're able to kind of take them out at your leisure for the most part. It really where the challenge is just learning how to traverse. And to the game's credit, and I think you mentioned it before, Diamond, the game and the levels are designed around this mechanic. So it's kind of similarly to Castlevania, where like you have that stiff jump, but like all the jumps are kind of designed around that. Like when you jump, you're locked into that arc. Similarly with Bionic Commando, once you like all the platforms and levels and like anchor points are designed around where your bionic arm can grapple to.
It's I don't want to call like the first level like it's not on par with like Super Mario Brothers 1-1, but the first stage you enter in Bionic Commando NES is very much okay. Take a breath. Look at the space. Like, what do you think? What do you think you're gonna do here? How do you get around here? Because like you every stage you parachute in, and I think almost right away if you start running to the right, you're gonna run to a barrel, and the barrel is not big, and I think your instinct is like, okay, I'll push a button to jump over the barrel, but you're not gonna jump over the barrel because you can't jump. But there's lots of things around you where it's like, oh, I could maybe go up there. I could maybe go up there. And the game really quickly establishes, okay, here's a platform you can climb up. Here's a platform you can't climb up, but you can still latch onto it. And if you swing, if you the default control, I think it's different than the arcade game. The default on the NES version is you press the A button and you launch your arm up at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's correct.
And if you want it, you can shoot it up or you can shoot it straight out, but you have to like use the D-pad with that. The default is 45 degrees, which means if you latch on once and you push forward, you just start swinging. And once you're swinging, you can go through a lot of stuff. You can't go through solid walls, but like the barrel is in front of you, you can just swing right through it. Okay. And the game just gives you this sort of playground space to figure things out. There's not a lot of enemies. There's like a couple enemies there, but they're really not that big of a threat. It's more about explore the space, figure out how to move up, figure out how to go around, and then, there's like a midpoint where there is like a gap. It's like, okay, here is a thing that is very clearly latch onto this thing and swing across the gap. Because if you don't do this, you cannot proceed. You can't get to the second half of the level, which has a lot more enemies, and it has a door, and eventually it has like a very long descent into the center of the base, which is a lot harder. So like before you get to that point, They want to give you this nice, breezy, open air space of just mess around. Go ahead. Swing. Be.
There's no time limit. You don't have to worry. It's not like Mario Brothers where you have to worry about beating it at a certain time frame. And also the fact that anchor point to swing to that second area you're talking about, Diamond, is pretty clearly marked. Like, and I'm it took me a little bit to figure it out. And normally I would not like a game where it's just like, just try random things until you get to the thing you're supposed to do. But the area is not huge. So it's not like it's giving you this big open space just to be like, here, try random things in this gigantic space to figure out where you need to go next. It's a small contained space and really kind of gives you a lot of leeway to practice all the different mechanics and stuff like that, and the traversal mechanics specifically. And I appreciate that, because it is a hard skill to get used to. And I think, like, when you watch speedrunners of this game, it's just wild to see how much they've mastered the swinging arm mechanic with this. And it's not like and like, you do have weapons and you can take out enemies, but for the most part, like, the enemies are relatively easy to take out. You can take them out with a couple shots, or you can use your bionic arm to then push them in different directions, which you could also push them off the edge if you want to. But that first area is just such a great, like, litmus test for you. If you can't get past that, you're not going to be able to figure out how to play the rest of the game. And even later on in the first level, there's sections where there's tons of enemies that come at you, but by that point you've already done enough swinging, and for the most part you're in long hallways, so it's easy to it's not like you're trying to take them out and swing at the same time, which they do make you do later on. And what I was going to say, I don't know what I'm going to edit out with this. Is going to be a weird, interesting edit. This is kind of funny. I totally forgot, like, when I was first playing this, I did not understand your default arm swing was at a 45-degree angle. I kept trying to hit diagonal up and left or up and right, and it made it so much more difficult to do those swings. Like, I kept, because I would do that, it would maybe go straight up or straight left or straight right. Once I figured out that all you have to do is just hit the arm button and you just automatically does a 45-degree angle, holy shit, it opened up the game. It was amazing.
Yeah, things just kind of click into place eventually with it. And I agree that, like, with you guys, that it is a very well designed intro level for the game. But I also Josh, this is kind of a question for you / like kind of an explanation of another mechanic. So with every stage, there are like rooms where you can either communicate with your home allies, or you can wiretap into the enemy's communications. And these kind of progress the story, so you're getting like some information about like what's going on around you, and you're also getting hints on like how to deal with certain things in the levels, certain bosses. But they also are unlocking other doors, and I think that's the one thing. So I had a friend of mine that I lent Bionic Commando to about 2 weeks ago, and because I've been raving to him, me and him play a lot of NES games together, but he's a little bit younger and he hasn't played a lot of these games. So I gave him Bionic Commando and was like, "This is my favorite game. Try it out." And he could not figure out how to use how to open that first door in that first level. He did not understand that you have to go into that room all the way at the top and use a specific communicator. And do both things, and then it'll say, "Hey, we're unlocking this door for you," and then go down there. So I don't know if you ran into that, Josh, during your first playthrough, but I know that's like a problem with some people, that they don't really quite understand that aspect of it.
I did not, because I just went and I did both the wiretap and the communication thing, and it said, "Hey, we unlocked this door for you." But then once I got down to the section, I'm like, I don't know I can't tell which door you claimed you unlocked. So I don't know if I got to it or if I didn't find it or what. So now I know that I definitely did, because you can't progress unless you get it. But I had no idea. I found it just by random chance. I do like those rooms, though, not only because it offers a little bit of puzzle solving, but also the fact that it can add context to the story, because you can see like behind the scenes, like with the wiretapping, you'll see what the enemy's doing and whatnot. I always thought that was kind of cool, even though the localization of this is very rough, and reading it, I didn't understand a goddamn thing that they were talking about, but it was still cool. I understood what they were trying to do, and I kind of forgave the rough localization.
It gets better later. Like that's like how like Hitler in his resurrection is like introduced is when you're wiretapping. And I remember like
Excuse me, Master D.
Master D, excuse me, pardon me. We're still talking about Hitler,
Yeah, I
no
know.
Fukatsu. But I feel like there are some really, really cool story beats. Most of it is like very poorly translated, just really cheesy dialogue. But I feel like there's still like a really cool story there. If you know, like especially when you're a kid, you know, I think that I really was like, oh wow, this is a very mature storyline. You know, it felt like something out of like an 80s like sci-fi like alternate history movie or something like that. So I felt very mature when playing it, I guess, in a sense.
One
Mhm.
interesting aspect to me to the whole communications room thing is that, like a lot of stuff in this game, it's mostly optional. Like this game, it's very unusual NES game to me in that you have
Yeah.
this essentially almost an open world. Like you've got this big like this overworld map, and you can choose which stage you go to in which order. And the game only has a few checkpoints where it makes you like, oh, you know, you must play this stage before you advance. Like you have to do this. So all these stages, you enter the stage. Almost every stage has at least one, maybe even more than one communication room. And in this first level, you have to go to the communication room to open the door. But there are other stages where the communication room doesn't actually do anything. It's just there for flavor. And indeed, there are entire levels that are kind of like just for flavor. You don't have to do them at all. And it's kind of a very unusual game for its era in that sense, where it's like you can you can play this game and do 100% and clear the entire game in about an hour, or you can just play the essential levels and finish it in about like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's very, very short
Yeah.
if you know how to beeline straight to the end. And as you're going through these levels, even like the optional ones, like Diamond was saying, you are unlocking an item at the end of each level. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be a new gun, that could be something that lets you take an extra hit, um, or it could be like kind of a pass to get through to this next area that is blocked off, has a wall in front of it essentially, or sometimes literally that you can't get without a specific item. So you're kind of like getting these items, even if like you don't necessarily need them. You have options as you go along, and before you each level, you have a loadout screen, so you can pick which communicator you want to use, and these communicators, like you need specific communicators for certain levels so you can access the communication in wiretaps. You have different weapons like a machine gun and a rocket launcher. You'll have different things that will like protect you from enemy hits. So you're like picking these things, and you're like customizing your character almost going into each level as you collect more and more things, which is a very cool kind of thing. I feel like that wasn't being used a lot at that point, especially in like a platformer.
It's also, yeah, at this stage, it's very similar that you can only pick one gun when you go on a level. Like, you cannot change weapons mid level. You have to quit out and start over.
Yeah, and
Which,
they did change that later on.
oh, yeah.
That was like a quality of life thing they changed in the later games, but it was kind of annoying in this game particularly. But I would say, Josh, you were talking about the difficulty of this game, and I feel like this game is really, really tough the first few times you play it, but with anybody that has played through this like multiple times and has a very good understanding of the game, you start to understand like a lot of tricks you can do to make the game far easier. Like you can just, once you get the rocket launcher, that is your gun for the rest of the game. It destroys everything. It is super cheap,
If I'm
completely
now, correct me
unbalanced.
if I'm wrong. The other weapons don't have ammo. It's the same. They're essentially like
Nothing has ammo.
Yeah,
nothing
there's
is
no
ammo.
ammo
It's
in
just
this game at
unlimited
all.
ammo no matter
Yeah.
what. Okay, that because I'm so used to all the specialty guns in almost any game having ammo. So when I did get like a secondary weapon, as what little I did play of the game, I never used it. I'm like, well, I don't want to waste all this ammo. Never even considering the fact that like, oh, it's just unlimited. So yeah, that's what I even watching a speed run of this. Excuse me, I saw an old Games Done Quick speed run of this, and they're saying the same thing. Like, just use the rocket launcher; it completely wrecks everything.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
it's an unusual weapon. Like, and the only downside to the rocket launcher is you only can fire one bullet at a time, but that one bullet will kill almost every enemy in the game in one hit, and even bosses, it will do huge damage. So,
Yeah, just a couple hits from that will take down almost any boss in the
yeah.
entire
So
game.
there are other weapons that have certain advantages. Like there's one weapon you have to use at some point to enter a stage. That's a very important stage. And the three-way like shoots like these like bursts of fire, and it penetrates shields. So that weapon is very useful in that stage because there are like enemies driving like cranes at you, and the cranes like chain
Oh
will
yeah, they
block.
messed me up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those chains will block your shots. So if you try to hit with a rocket launcher, you have to get behind it first. Whereas the
Yeah.
three-way gun will just go right through that. Like, okay, fine. But at the end of the stage, there's actually a difficult boss, which is kind of rare for this game. Most of the bosses are not difficult. There is a somewhat difficult boss where it's like, if you have the three-way gun, you have to be a lot more careful. Where if you have a rocket launcher, it's just, I think it's like 3 hits and he dies. So
Yeah. So that's kind of the thing is with this game, it's really once you kind of know the, I don't want to say cheese, but like there's like little things you can do, like you were saying in that first stage, that towards the end of the stage you have like an onslaught of enemies coming towards you, and that might seem like a bad thing at first, but that is a great place to farm. And as you kill enemies, they drop little canisters. And every time you collect a certain amount of canisters, you level up and can take an extra hit. So your life bar is extending the more enemies you kill. So a lot of people will just farm that first section, that first stage, and go into the next stage with like 6 or 7 hit points, making things far easier. And then a lot of people also don't know that you can just skip like the boss enemies they throw at you. You don't even have to kill them. You just have to kill the generator behind them. So you can just almost ignore them, especially with the rocket launcher, and just put 2 or 3 hits into that thing, and you're done. You can just ignore. That's changed in like the remakes, but that was like something that was very easy to, I guess, cheese in a sense.
I think that's kind of cool though, because it offers a little bit more strategy and like a variety to this than compared to other games that were coming out at the time, which would just be, beat the boss. And I thought this was cool where the boss was almost an obstacle as opposed to like a test, if that makes sense. Like in a weird sense, actually, the boss was more testing your platforming skills and how well you could dodge it so you could shoot the core, as opposed to testing your combat skills and seeing. I mean, obviously, if you take out the boss, then you don't have to worry about it. Then the reward is that you can just shoot the core unimpeded. But it almost seems to, like, when I would play it, it almost felt like a reward. It was more rewarding to me, I should say, to be able to take out the core without actually trying to beat the boss. It was actually almost easier for me to go after the core and just kind of like practice my dodging and whatnot. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Definitely. And I think that's like one thing that Bionic Commando gets a lot of flack for, though, is the lack of, it reuses a lot of bosses, and they aren't even, they're kind of optional in a sense. So you just can kind of almost ignore them half the time, especially if you have the rocket launcher. And they kind of become almost an afterthought, which is, like I said, something they changed in the remakes and fixed moving forward. But the generators are actually the final boss from the first game. So that's they pulled that from the first game and kind of implemented it into Bionic Commando just in at the end of every single stage. And something else to talk about is, we were talking about the map. There is an overworld map where you're kind of like moving from stage to stage. There are trucks on that map. So when you run into the trucks, you'll see another Western influence kind of bleeding over into the series. And it goes into this kind of overhead commando type of stage, where it's like an overhead military shooter that plays almost identical to Commando. They weren't even really trying to hide it. So that's another one where they're kind of like, they're not linked, but they linked them in America. And when they made this follow up to Bionic Commando, Commando now becomes kind of like a part of the top secret / Bionic Commando series. They kind of start to become conjoined with these little bonus things. And this is how you get continues too, is by finishing these overhead commando little sections. You earn continues, so you can pretty much have unlimited continues to finish the game, which I feel like makes it even easier.
Oh, I see. When I first was playing this, I just kind of like, I wasn't a fan of those sections, so I just kind of ran past them as fast as I could. I'm like, I don't want to deal with you. I'm just going to keep on running.
Oh yeah, that's how you get continues. That is like a huge thing. So if you die, you can like just keep continuing and essentially farming them unlimited.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual decision, because at first glance, Bionic Commando seems incredibly hard by Nintendo standards, because your character one hit kills them and you only have like 2 lives, I think, or maybe 3, and there is no continue option by default. So you have to spend time with the game, both figuring out how the systems work. Essentially, it's that they don't say levels, but like you essentially level up your character to give them an actual life bar, and then you fight in the top-down stages, and like they're not bosses, but there are enemies in the top-down stages that give you the continues that you have to like think about for a second before you shoot them. Like there's a Jeep guy, and there's a guy who has there's another guy who has like a bionic armor of his own, which is like it'll block your shots. But yeah, again, if you have the rocket launcher, one hit will kill those guys, whoever they are, and it drops a little eagle icon. That is your continue icon, and then you just keep playing. Because as I mentioned at the top, there is no save game for this game, so it's like if you don't play with it by those rules, you either have to be very good so you don't die, or you have to collect these continues so you can keep playing.
Yeah, for sure. And without the manual, like this is like a game where the instruction manual is incredibly important because you wouldn't even know that those are continues you're collecting.
Or even with the manual, some of this stuff was like really hard to like I was saying before at the beginning before we got into the gameplay in earnest, when we were just talking about the localization, or when I kind of started off with the localization, like trying to understand the story of this game is so difficult based off the manual. So like the manual is bizarre to me because in terms of gameplay, like you were saying, Chris, you wouldn't know what each thing is for, how it would help you. But then when you read, but when you get all those power-ups and then you know what they are, but when you're trying to understand the context of everything, like the what it actually says, I have the manual up in front of me right now. This is assuming this is the correct manual. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like I believe I found the correct scan of it.
Does it talk about the BADS, the BADDS?
Well, it goes, I'll talk about a person which I've met when I was young. In 1980X, we found Naz's top secret material called Albatross, which I know is actually Albatross, but just a weird spelling, a plan which never was put to practice. Imperial forces Generalissimo Kilt had never seen this plan and decided to materialize this plan. The Federation decided to stop his attempt by sending our hero Super Joe, but lost contact with him. Our brave man, you the player, was sent to the Empire with a special mission to rescue Super Joe. The story begins from here. Now, this tells me fuck all right?
It's poorly written, but if you know what's going on, like you totally get what they're talking about.
You don't know what's going on from that's the problem.
It's awful. Listen, it's terrible. It's a terrible description of the events.
The very first sentence loses me. I'll talk about a person which I've met when I was young. Which person are they talking about? Is it Super Joe? Is it Generalissimo Kilt? Who are they talking about in that first sentence? I don't know.
That's fair.
I think it's also significant that you can tell the manual was definitely made at a different time than the finished product, because they call the enemies the NAZ, NAZZ, whereas if you play the game, they're called the BADS, BADD.
That's so weird. I never even picked that up until now. Yeah, I guess they really kind of like had the Nazi kind of thing there before they're like, no, that's too close. Let's change it some more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff. Honestly, Capcom manuals of this era were very much, you get what you get. Like if you look down, there's a thing that says player. Yeah, they don't name the character. They just say player, and it says shoot in 8 directions. You cannot shoot in 8 directions in this game. You cannot do that.
No, you cannot.
It's like way back the Mega Man 1 manual says Mega Man can duck. Mega Man cannot duck.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It also says shoot in 8 directions, wave wires.
Again, the wire action game thing. That's what they're talking about.
That's the commando controls right there.
Oh,
you can shoot 8 ways and wave your wire, and only in the commando stages.
You're right. In the top-down stages, you can shoot in every direction. But in the regular game, you can only fire straight forward. You cannot aim at all. That's it.
But they don't differentiate that, unfortunately, so it's very confusing.
That's really funny. That makes a lot more sense. I also love. I don't know if I'll include a picture of it or something. Maybe you know what? Maybe it'll be the thumbnail for the episode. I'll get like a PNG of it. The picture of the wide gun in the manual is my favorite thing ever. It is like it's like a Tommy gun that they just super glued like rockets on the 45-degree angles going up and down. It's wonderful.
It's
That's
honestly, it's like
amazing.
one step removed from the gun that Moe has in The Simpsons, where it's like 5 guns together. Like that's what it looks like.
Well, in the same way with the 3-way gun, which
Yeah.
is just, it just looks like a cross that shoots bullets out at each of the directions.
Oh, there's another thing that made it past the quote unquote censors is the cross icon that you get.
Oh yeah.
That was never everything in every other game they scrubbed it free of anything cross related, especially Castlevania. But that also made it past the Nintendo censors, surprisingly.
But not like Shield. He's a Christian boy apparently.
I guess so. Oh man,
Praise be to Jesus. Oh my God, that's why I think just what I've really enjoyed about this game, like just to bring it back to the gameplay here, I think what I just really like enjoyed about playing this and just kind of observing through watching it and listening to our conversation here is just how far ahead this game really felt for the time it came out, right? Like this game has a lot of depth for an action platformer. Especially like what other games would have been its contemporary? Like I know Castlevania came out the year before in North America, and Mega Man would have been already out, I would assume, at this point.
I think Blaster Master, like Meta Fight, the Famicom version was out this year, if I remember correctly, in '88. That's the only thing I could really think of.
I'm reminded of Castlevania 2 as much as like, okay, there's lots of NPCs you can talk to, because this game also has NPCs. We didn't really talk about the neutral stages yet, but
Yeah.
Go
into it, Diamond.
there are entire so in the overworld map there are stages where you just fight and you get to the end and you destroy a reactor and then you advance, but there are also stages that are called neutral stages that have a sort of a white, not like face, like white, like uniform, I guess they're white faces, whatever. And the idea is that these stages are where your army and the enemy army are allowed to intermingle, but if you fire your gun at all, then the white soldiers will suddenly attack you, and like they will never stop attacking until you leave the stage. And in these stages, it's kind of like it's both story purposes and supply purposes, because like some of these stages will have important items you need, but some of them just have seemingly random moments. Like you'll go into like a room and you might find more like power up, or you might find like a spider just like chilling.
It's such a weird room.
Although honestly, looking at it now as an adult, I don't think that's supposed to be a spider. I think it's supposed to be one of those what do you call them, like the house centipedes, because they got too many legs. It's not a spider, but
it's like a Nazi mutated millipede.
It's freaky. It's freaky. But like, yeah, you go to these neutral, like at what point you actually meet what you think is the last boss in a neutral stage. Like he's patrolling around and he talks to you and he taunts you, and you won't see him again until the very end of the game, where Hitler kills him with lightning magic.
Yeah, you didn't even fight him. He just kills him. The guy you think you're going to be fighting the whole time is just like, he's just dead instantly. You don't even get a chance to mess with him. Hitler just kills him. Or sorry, Master D, excuse me.
I still can't get over, like, it boggles my mind that I need to recollect myself, because the game is just like, it flabbergasted me for a moment there. Knowing what I knew about, like, I knew before doing this episode, I already knew about Hitler's head exploding, right? I knew that was like one of the big things at the end of the game. I had no idea before doing research for this. Granted, it was your research, Chris, but the fact that the original game was literally just called like Resurrection of Hitler, that it wasn't even like being fucking subtle. It was putting it right on Front Street. They're like, hey, Hitler, he's coming back. Be ready for it.
He's on the box.
I just could.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. And the fact that there was, swastikas and everything in the original version, and obviously they swapped it out for like kind of like the eagle icon that we see.
He's on the box cover, the Japanese, the Famicom box cover. He's literally like there, like in the background with his like arms spread. It's the opposite of subtlety. It's very much in your face over there. It's I love it. I think it's cool. It's one of my favorite Japanese box arts of all time. I think it's just, the artwork's great, but it is just crazy. But from what I understand, I don't really have like a source for this or anything. It's just kind of from people I've talked to and from reading things. But apparently, the game has like somewhat of a controversial reputation in Japan for just being like kind of mature and maybe taking things a little too far a bit. I don't like know for sure if that's how it is felt, or if that's like kind of the perception over there. But just like from a few people I've spoken with, it just seems like that's kind of the tone I've gotten from them, is that that's kind of, it's seen as almost like a very controversial game on the Famicom.
Well, I mean, certainly this level of gore on the system was not common. You know,
Yeah,
like we talk about how Nintendo of America had their very strict practices and they took a lot of stuff that was in Japan. But even in Japan, there weren't a lot of games that would show a graphic mutilation of a human body like this. You know,
I
that's
think Sweet Home was another one that comes to mind. Coincidentally, both directed by the same guy who did the Famicom.
yeah, Tokuro
Top Secret.
Fujiwara. Yeah, that's him.
Oh no! So the Hotchan did. I found this out later. The Hotchan is actually the designer. Tokuro Fujiwara still worked on the game, but Hotchan, who I don't have a name for, like there's people that have kind of like guessed at who it is, but there's no like confirmation as to who Hotchan is at Capcom.
Oh, okay.
He was a designer, or one of the designers on Hiro no Fukatsu, and also worked on Sweet Home, which are both like two of the most violent, just gory games on the Famicom, which I thought was kind of interesting.
And of course, Sweet Home directly reads Resident Evil. So
yes, exactly, yeah, for
Sweet
sure. And Fujiwara was obviously very involved with that.
Sweet Home, the movie and the game, I believe, are 89. So this game predates those. But yeah,
Okay.
Sweet Home is another game that's you know, it's essentially a horror RPG. So like, yeah, there are monsters, there are bodies, and but even then, it's still, I don't think there's anything on the level of here is a human being with a face, you're going to shoot him and he explodes.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely not as bad.
Looking at the picture you linked, Diamond, of the Famicom box art, I think they're kind of even hinting at it. If you look at the text, there's blood dripping down the title.
Oh yeah,
of like it's telling you, you know, like it's foreshadowing that Hitler's head, yeah, it's going to explode.
So this game apparently did not sell very well in Japan. It was a very big flop over there. But it did sell far better in the West. It performed a lot better. So that was kind of something I thought was very surprising, because I think Bionic Commando did well over there, but its sequel slash like, you know, retelling or Famicom version, Famicom port, did not perform well. So it kind of was not looked at favorably for many years by Capcom Japan.
That makes perfect sense to me. That explains why this game doesn't really have a large footprint, you know, in the 90s at all. Like if you look at other Capcom games from the 80s, if it sold well, they like, okay, well, this sells well, let's make more of them. And if this game, whatever its reputation, if it didn't sell well in Japan, that's the end of it. You know, like this, the only other thing I think of is like there was a Game Boy version called Bionic Commando, I believe, in both territories. And it's basically the same story as this game, except they remove all the Hitler stuff. It's now like a weird like sci-fi story. And it just, you know, like story-wise, I think level-wise, it's almost identical, but art-wise and just presentation-wise, it looks totally different.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think since it sold very well in the West, Capcom still wanted to make it and keep like the series like potentially going. They wanted to give it like another shot. And obviously, yeah, that Game Boy version released in 92, so 4 years afterwards. And it was not developed by Capcom themselves, but Minakuchi Engineering, who also did all of the Rockman World / the Mega Man games on Game Boy. Yeah. So it was, they are good. And it was a third party to Capcom developing this. And the crazy thing is like you see the full Western influence push in, because the Japanese version is named Bionic Commando as well. So they're both called Bionic Commando. And like you were saying, they scrap all the Nazi stuff, they scrap all the Hitler stuff. It is a far future sci-fi game. And the weird thing is the first half of the game is completely just a straight up, almost exact NES port of it. So the first, like, I think 6 or 7 stages are all just pulled from the NES game, and then the second half of the game are completely new stages.
Oh, okay.
It's just a totally different game. So it's almost like Bionic Commando 1.5 or 2.5, however you want to classify it. But it's like a point 0.5 like step from the NES game, which I thought was very, very
Weird.
interesting.
Yeah.
But
And then
yeah.
Well, and then there was the Game Boy Color. Like, I know it's not technically like a port of the original Bionic Commando, but there's that Game Boy Color version too, which has completely different characters. But I watched some videos of it. The animation for the sprites look amazing.
Gorgeous. Very difficult. It's an American made game too. It's made by Nintendo.
Yeah,
So
and like working with from what I saw in your documentary, like DigiPen students.
So Nintendo, it was DigiPen students. So it was a collaboration between Nintendo and the DigiPen University, and it was called Nintendo Software Technology. And it was such a man. This is like opening up a whole nother can of worms. But that's like a whole interesting story in its own, because it is a American formed studio in Seattle. And their first 3 games were not even Nintendo games. They were third-party properties. So their very first game was Bionic Commando Elite Forces, which is it's an original game. It is not a port of anything. It is similar to the Game Boy game, where it's very like high sci-fi, like far future sci-fi. Very borrows a lot of even a lot of the music from the Game Boy version. And then they also did a port of Crystalis, SNK's Crystalis, on the Game Boy Color.
Yeah.
And then they also did Ridge Racer 64. So their first 3 games were pretty big properties from other third-party developers or publishers from this like studio that was just kind of like pulled from like kind of nowhere in America, which is kind of at that point in time, I feel like was kind of like a big deal to be pulling these Japanese properties and being allowed to work on them. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's just wild to me. Now I do want to move on a little bit, because we've talked about the game for the most. I feel like we've covered a lot of the gameplay and a lot of the history. Chris, I want to thank you so much for taking the reins with that, because I tend to stumble if I'm not as well versed on a topic. I'll do the research, but I tend to stumble through my own speech a little bit. So, man, you really saved my ass on this one. So, thank you so much for just kind of leading that charge. I learned so much just listening. That was amazing.
There's a lot more information in the video too. So,
yes.
wink, wink. If you want to check it out.
I didn't want that. I specifically did not want you to just recite everything either. I'm like, make my listeners go find the video. I'll include a link in the show notes. They should watch all your stuff, of course. But if you want to learn more about what happened after this game in the Bionic Commando series, go check out the rest of Chris's video. What I do want to touch on quick here is just the overall visuals and presentation and sound of the game. Like we couldn't fully, we only kind of touched on it little bits here and there, but I just kind of our thoughts with it. And like, I want to say, at least from my standpoint, like it was interesting for me, because listening to playing the game and listening to the music, it was like, I like this music for the most part. It was, pretty catchy melody. It was fine, but it didn't like blow me away. Listening to the orchestrated rendition of it really kind of brought out, like, how can I put this? On the NES, the melody is like really good, but it's kind of buried in the fact that like there's not a whole lot of like bass or other things to kind of round out the sound or arrangement.
I will not have this blasphemy in this house.
I'm not saying it's bad. I think it sounds a little hollow to me. And then hearing the full version of it, like the full orchestration, I'm like, oh, I see what they were trying to do, but didn't quite have like all the sound channels or capabilities.
Oh yeah,
they did a good enough job. I'm not trying to say, but you know what, Chris, you can call me out on the blasphemy. I'll take it. I'll take your thoughts on it.
All right.
I think
I'll keep. Go ahead.
I think this game is actually very loud, and that does the music a disservice, because not only are you, obviously there's guns and you're shooting things, but the arm itself has a very distinct noise. It's an awesome noise, but like every time you use your arm and grapple onto things, you're with zoonch, zoonch. So that is going to dominate the soundtrack. And also later on, when you start facing enemies that have like helicopter blades, the game essentially like removes an entire sound channel, so you hear the helicopters coming. And I think that does the music a disservice, because I think the music is very good. I want to point out, by the way, that Harumi Fujita is the credited composer for the arcade game, and 2 of those tracks make it into the home version, but the home version is credited to Junko Tamiya, who did a lot of other NES games of this era, and I think it's a great score. However, I would admit that if you listen to the remake soundtrack, the Bionic Commando Rearmed soundtrack, which the composer I did not look up, I believe he's from
it's the director too. I can't remember his name. He directed the game and did the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's
I'm gonna look.
Yeah,
it up
why don't we just look at? Let's say his name. I forget his name. I'm sorry.
Rearmed. Oh my gosh, I should know.
Swedish, maybe. I think it's Swedish.
What is his name? Simon Wiklund.
Yes. That is an awesome remix, remaster interpretation of these tunes. Like, I love that music. It's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. Very like cool electronic remixes of it.
But for an NES game, I think, like, especially the first stage, it has this sort of like I don't know what you call them, like those military drums. You know, it's very much like, hey, let's go. We're on a soldier. We're on a mission. Let's start shooting people.
It's very, very catchy. And I didn't realize, so what's really interesting is that I did not realize that the Bionic Commando quote unquote theme from the NES game, that first stage, is, like you said, it's one of the 2 tracks that was pulled from the arcade game. But what I didn't know, I knew that it came from the arcade game, but I didn't know that the arcade version is like an extra like minute and 10 seconds longer. It has like a whole like military kind of like 1940s, 1950s like military like march theme that goes after it. So it's like almost like a 2-minute song, which is I did not realize until just recently. It's very cool, worth listening to.
I had no idea. I learned something new today. I learned a lot new today. And I also want to just quick comment on, I really like the visuals of this game. Like I think they're very bright. They pop out really well. I actually, while the sprite is kind of a little silly looking because his hair, I understand why they made it the way they did based off of the illustrated version of the character and how they kind of represented him in the sprite form. But like, I don't know. I like the color palette of this game, and I like how they chose to like show off the different, how they make it very distinct what platforms you can and can't grapple onto, and whether it's like the little circular ball that you use as like a focal point to get to the other side. Like that took me a little bit to find initially, but since it's like it is very bright, it is the only real point of visual interest on the first level, on that, like in that first section before you go to the other side. Once you get to the edge of that first platform and you climb up and down, it's the only real point of visual interest. So the game clearly teaches you through that, like, hey, you need to like keep an eye out for this, because you will be able to use this as the game goes on. I don't know. I know I'm not doing like a really in-depth breakdown of why I like the visuals. I just think it's colorful. I think it works, and I think they do a good job of kind of painting the world that you find Rad or Lad in the North American version, Rad in, and like this like crazy universe. It's really cool.
It's great. Yeah, great sprite art. I feel like I said, a lot of things in this game were very ahead of their time, and I feel like the graphics and sprite work are right up on par with, you know, like the Mega Man games that were very gorgeous at that time too.
I think the player character in this version feels like a midpoint between the original Japanese design and the American design, because they clearly want him to look like a soldier. Like, he's got a big green uniform on. If you look at the giant sprite you see at the end of, like, when you beat a stage, you get a really big sprite of the hero, and like he's covered in like equipment. Like, he's got like bullets and like, I guess, a cable and a radio and like he's got so much stuff on him. Like, he's definitely like a man on a mission. Whereas he still has like his hair, depending on what, like, I guess on your TV settings, like his hair is either brown or maybe even pink. Like, it's a very shocking color. It's very vertical. It's got a lot of like, you know, reach to it. And he's wearing sunglasses, which I think is probably just like Mario's hat and mustache. Like, we want to make his face more distinct, so we put sunglasses on him. which is funny because like he looks nothing like the guy they drew for the American version, like cover wise. So it's
Yeah.
like they clearly based all the in-game stuff on the arcade game, but they made him look a little more like, mature soldier like. But they still in America, it's like, okay, no, he's a GI Joe guy. Come on, look at it, totally different
That was
look.
par for the course,
Yeah,
though. I feel like at that point, like that was like almost every game was like these very realistic, like like action figure, like He-Man,
Mega
GI
Man,
Joe.
anyone?
yeah.
Exactly.
Honestly, I wish someone had kept that for a little while longer. I would have loved to see what they would have had like some American artists come up with for like say, I don't know, Final Fantasy 6 or 7. Like, no, here's the new cast. Everyone has got muscles and they look plastic, That would be really funny to like reimagine Cloud Strife as like he's not 80% hair. It's just
That, I would have been here for it. I also want to say also real quick with the graphics too. You brought it up, Diamond, how it's like a midway point between the two different styles. I actually also think it's a midway point in almost the evolution of NES graphics. Like there are some older NES games, like Castlevania. When did Mega Man 1 come out? I don't
87.
87.
87. Okay. Like Mega Man 1 and Castlevania, I think still like they can you put them up against later NES games, not like I'm talking super late, but like a couple years later, even NES games, they still kind of hold their own. This game very much feels like this isn't like the black box visual games, but it's also not your Mario 3. It's like somewhere in between those two, and you can kind of see the evolution of NES graphics as they progressively got better and better, whether it's because more the chips that were in the cartridges or just getting used to the palette, the
Yeah,
artists were
more
getting more
memory,
used
better
to it.
mappers,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And I think this game still looks visually pretty decent, but I think I'm more interested in it by the fact that I can see the progress in art direction overall as the NES gets on, and this one feels like a midpoint between like I said, the black box NES games, which almost feel just like straight up almost like matte images that are the sprites, like there's no outlines, there's no borders, nothing like that, and this game kind of has a little bit of both, and I love that. I think it's a great looking game.
I'm looking
Oh
at the
yeah.
Japanese sales flyer, and it's interesting that they hype the fact that this is a 2 mega ROM cassette. So you can
2
tell.
mega ROM.
Well, I'm just saying, obviously, at this point, like
That was big for back then.
yeah, the Famicom Disk System had come out, and a lot of we didn't get it in America, so a lot of the games that came out of the disk system came to America as regular cartridges. We didn't know that they were actually expansions, but they had some limitations. But by the late 80s, you have, various companies realizing, oh wait, the disc system is cool, but if we just put more chips in the cartridge, we have to pay, we pay more, but we get to do more stuff, which is why I think a game like this could not have existed a few years earlier because they wouldn't have had the chips. They wouldn't have had the access to the chips.
Yeah, I think Ghosts and Goblins was one of the first 1 megabit cartridges, and that was like a few months after the disc system had come out, and that was kind of like the writing on the wall already. Just a few months into the disc system's lifespan, was like there was already games that could kind of match that level of storage very quickly, which was kind of like the big selling point for that. So yeah, and then 2 megs was definitely, I think, bigger than what a disc could even hold on the disc system. So that was pretty impressive.
Very likely. And then, but then of course, yeah, within a few years, like suddenly you're getting 4 megs and 6. Like it grew like exponential growth. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one last like fun fact about Bionic Commando slash Hitler's Resurrection of Hitler is that it has never gotten a single port except for one small North American only Game Boy Advance Capcom collection called Capcom Classics Mini Mix. It has never been re-released since. That has been the only time it has been ported. It's one of the few non-licensed Capcom games I think that has that fact attached to it.
I wonder why they haven't brought it back over. Like I feel like with I don't know. Right now, I feel like this is like people are just hankering for games in general. Like, look at the time we're recording this is like a week or so after or almost a week after the Nintendo Direct, the Big Switch 2 Direct. They brought back like Kirby Air Ride of all things, which I know Kirby has a lot more cachet than Bionic Commando. But like, I don't know. I feel like you could totally bring this back. It's just weird that they never even.
Well, they did,
Like
but
they haven't
that's a
even
whole other
ported.
story. That's a
Well, yeah,
whole.
I mean, since those remakes or the remakes and the reimagining or
It was just
whatever it
sales,
is in
honestly.
2009.
I mean,
I think
yeah.
I think when a game succeeds in other territories but doesn't succeed in Japan, I think the Japanese company is going to say, "Well, that didn't work." You know?
Yeah, and that's why it was so hard for them to get these like the 2008, 2009, like the rearmed and the 3D one greenlit is because Capcom Japan was just like, no, like no one wants this series. I don't know what you're talking about, and Capcom USA had to like really push them because it was just not a very popular series with the Capcom Japan executives apparently. So just because it had sold so poorly.
Well, that's a bummer, but I that's a bummer. Well, I think that should do it for this episode of Still Loading. I think that's a good place to wrap up this episode. And I guess to wrap it up, just kind of, I guess we kind of been dancing around a little bit, but just kind of final thoughts on the game. You know, what's your final impression? Like, where do you think this game stands in the pantheon of NES and like overall? Like, maybe not overall game history. That's a heavy question, but at least in the pantheon for you on the NES and just kind of your overall thoughts with it. I'll go first, and I'll give you two, my wonderful guests, the final word on it. And to me, this game is a pleasant surprise. It's one of those ones where I, would hear about it, people talk about it, give it glowing reviews, and while I struggled with it, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and I don't think I brought it back, and I'm going to bring it back now. I didn't necessarily have a good time with this game, not because it wasn't fun, but because I had a hard time learning the controls. And I don't think the game is bad because of that. I think the game is very intentional, and it very much it gives you all the mechanics you need from the get-go, like Diamond said, where for this first level really focuses on teaching you how to play the game with the mechanics that it gives you, and it encourages you to kind of poke around at the edges and try things. And the game does not dumb itself down for the general player. It tells the player, like, these are the mechanics that you need to learn. Here is the level to teach it. Figure it out. And I don't think it does it in an unfair way. And so while I had frustration with this game, I really enjoyed the challenge of trying to learn it. And it's something that I genuinely think I'm going to go back and earnestly try to beat, because what I did play, I enjoyed, and I just love the ideas in this game. So to me, this game was just a pleasant surprise. That's kind of my final thoughts. It was a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting to be as wowed by it as I was. So I'm happy I finally got to talk about it for the show. So I want to throw it over to Diamond first, and we'll throw it over to our returning guest. Diamond, your final thoughts.
Yeah, this game meant a lot to me as a kid. And I think one reason is the changes that were made. Because obviously no one was going to sell a game called Resurrection of Hitler in the United States. Like, obviously that was not going to happen.
What are you talking about?
But they changed just enough to turn Hitler's arrival in the game into sort of a surprise. You know?
Mm-hmm.
If you bought this game in Japan, you see Hitler's on the box, everyone's Nazis, like, okay, I'm going to fight some Nazis. Great. Good. Nazis are worth fighting. In America, instead we just get this sort of weird, if you just pick up the box, you see, again, you see this G.I. Joe looking guy on the cover, you see this army, it's like, okay, I'm shooting army, the bads might as well be Cobra, doesn't matter. But then you play this game for, hours at a time, because, you can't restart, you have to restart from the beginning every time. Like, the first time I saw Hitler come out of this game, I was like, wait, I'm fighting Hitler? This is actually Hitler? Because, again, they don't call him Hitler. So it's like, it becomes this huge, it's like a Sixth Sense kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, it's Hitler.
Yeah.
And part of the end game, this game is not big on boss battles, honestly. But there is sort of a challenging, almost like a puzzle kind of boss where you fight the albatross. And you got to figure out like how to climb it and how to shoot it. And then it comes to this big finale where it is literally like you swing over a gap and you fall and you have one shot. And if you shoot in the right spot, you blow up Hitler's face. And if you miss, Hitler shoots you and you die and you have to try again. So like it's kind of like it's like it's a one-hit kill either way. And then it leads to a whole escape sequence, and then the game ends. But it's like, to me, it became this incredible finale, even though it's not that complicated, but it had this emotional impact because we haven't really talked about this so far, but like, this is, 88, I'm playing 88, 89. I grew up Jewish, and this is, this is about when I probably would have started studying for my bar mitzvah. So having a video game where I encounter Hitler and shoot him in the fucking face and blow his head off, like, I don't.
Bionic Commando was your rite of passage.
Yeah, it's like I can't think of a video game that would have had more impact at that time. It was a huge, just a huge moment for me, and it's almost funny the fact that this game didn't really turn into a series. We've only had a few games since then, and all those games have absolutely walked back the Nazi. We didn't really talk about this, but like the eventual remake that they make, Bionic Commando Rearmed, they very much stick to the whole Bads, Master D. Like the last boss of that game is Master D. He is not Hitler. They cover his face. He's not Hitler. He's just not. So all the subsequent games basically take out that sort of barb, if you will. So this game, this one game, this release, which is now coming up on 40 years old, it sort of remains unique, and it's never been. It's kind of, it helps the power, I think, last for me. I really do. I really believe that.
That's an amazing, like, story. Like, the timing of the bar mitzvah in this is just, that is I don't know, it's serendipitous. I don't know if that it's the right word for that, like, is, because serendipitous is usually meant for a good thing. I would assume that's a good thing in your eyes, right, Diamond? Like, it worked out so perfectly.
I mean, the game doesn't give you an option to hear out Hitler's ideals, so in that sense it's deeply disappointing that we don't consider how Hitler feels about all this. Did Hitler ask to be resurrected? No. He
got a point.
He was dead.
It's very true.
Well, this is also Punch a Nazi month, so fuck that guy.
Very true.
Oh my goodness. All right, Chris, final thoughts from you.
I mean, I'll echo Diamond, where I think that it was the shock value of seeing Hitler in a game, even though he's not called Hitler, and then watching his head, like shooting a rocket launcher into his face and having his head blow up as a child. Like, it's one of those core memories in all of my years, my over 4 decades of playing video games, that I will never forget. I'll never forget where I was when I first saw that. It's like I said,
when you first blew up Hitler's head.
Exactly. And like I said, I there's a couple other like gaming experiences that probably stand out, but that is one where out of maybe like 3 or 4 major like core gaming memories, that is up there at the top, I would say. And it also just felt like such a mature game. Like, even looking back now playing it, I feel like for an NES game in the 1980s, there's nothing like it. There's nothing else like it. I feel like there was another game for the, I think, PC 98, Exile maybe, which is like another like really kind of like alternate reality game where I think like you have to like assassinate the president or something like that. It's like very, very like really much like Bionic Commando, where it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Very controversial. But I feel like Bionic Commando or Top Secret, whatever you want to call it, is just an incredibly mature game. It's very, very unlike anything else, where it kind of like, I felt like it respects your intelligence with the story, and it's not just like a, hey, there's the bad guy, let's go get him. It explains like the motivations behind everybody, like, in a cheesy, silly way, but in a way that was like very, very forward thinking for the time. And it's also a game that I can pick up and play whenever. Like I said, it's my favorite NES game. I think the game is flawed in some areas. I don't think it's perfect, but it is something I can always go back to and play this in the same way I can with like Mario 3 or The Legend of Zelda. I hold it up there is just this really great game that kind of transcends time in terms of just being so unique that I kind of have to go back to this one version of the game and play it to experience even anything remotely like it.
I would want to mention, maybe because it's from the same era, there were a couple Golgo 13 video games that came out in Japan and then came to America, which again, kind of unusual in that they were licensed property from Japan that really wasn't popular in America, but they still came out in America as Golgo 13 video games. And I think one of them involves a similar Hitler situation, but even though those games, and of course Golgo 13 in general, is like more mature, like it's aimed at adults, not aimed at kids, I still feel like the game presentation wise is just so much more simplistic. Like the sprite work and the character work is just, I don't know. It felt more surface level to me. There's like a lot of like maze hunting shit and first person like shooting gallery stuff that doesn't really strike me as appealing. Whereas this game is more of like, it's an adventure. It's two sides at war. You're part of an army. I don't know. The scale of this game feels huge to me. Whereas Golgo 13 as a solo, assassin investigating stuff. And I love Golgo 13. I'm not anti Golgo 13, but I know for me as a kid, I did not have any interest in Golgo 13. That's something I embraced later on. Whereas this game, I feel like still works, whatever your age is.
Golgo 13 feels, I would say, mature, but a little hollow in a sense. I'm with you. I like the game a lot, but I feel like it doesn't have this really great gameplay loop to back it up like Bionic Commando does.
Fun fact fun story, you mentioned Golgo 13, excuse me. I went to a game store a few weeks ago and I bought on a whim, just because of the title and the picture, the cover art, the Moffat Conspiracy, which apparently is the sequel to Golgo 13.
Yeah.
Kind of random side tangent.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of amusing. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I feel like I cut you both off. Did both of you get everything that you wanted to say in for our final thoughts here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of Still Loading. You all heard it here. Go play Bionic Commando. Go blow up Hitler's head. What a perfect way to end the first Punch a Nazi month. Who knows? Maybe there'll be more Punch a Nazi months in the future. There'll be maybe another one next year. First off, I want to thank both of my guests for joining me on this episode, Chris and Diamond. I can't thank you enough for devoting some of your time here and helping me out and punching some Nazis together. We collect a communal punching of Nazis. It was a good time. Thank you both for joining me. And I guess to throw it over to both of you, where can the good people find you online and what would you like to promote? Diamond, we'll start off with you.
Well, you can find me around the internet by going to my website. Look up Feit Club, Feit. That's my last name. CLUB. That's something you can also use to hit Nazis with. The works just as fist. My actual website is feitclub.me. That sort of collects what I'm working on. Obviously, I do a lot of Retronauts work, but I appear on other podcasts, such as this one. And I'm trying to work more as far as YouTube and Twitch and other things that, get myself out there, because at this point, podcasting and writing and producing media of this type seems to be my main job, because I get some money from it as opposed to other jobs which give me no money. So I guess I'm leaning into this. It's by all means, please get on there. And Josh, I don't want to, take over your show or anything, but I'd like to think that every month is Punch a Nazi month. I feel like we should stress that.
Especially
Absolutely.
in not topical times at all. You're very right.
Yeah. I mean, look,
very much
when was
so.
the last time you heard Richard Spencer speak publicly? The answer, you haven't.
Hey man, it fucking works. It works, and
direct action works. Sorry,
we got. There's plenty more games about punching Nazis.
Got to get Rad Spencer in there.
What? Sorry,
it's got to get Rad Spencer in there.
Oh God, I didn't realize the connection there. Wow, what a coincidence.
That's funny. All right, Chris, what about you? Where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
You can find me on YouTube as Rewind Arcade. I haven't done a video in about a year and a half, so I apologize for that. There's nothing really new on there, but there are plenty of documentaries on series like Ghosts and Goblins, Gradius, Ace Attorney, Katamari Damacy, all that stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check that out. You can also follow me on Instagram at Rewind Arcade VG, where I am constantly sharing a lot of my my Japanese game collection. I pretty much exclusively collect Japanese games these days, and I share a lot of photos of them and like to talk about them a little bit on there. So that's where you can track me down if you so desire.
All right. And as per usual, you can follow me on Blue Sky at Still Loading Pod. Also, .bsky.social, whatever. It's at Still Loading Pod's the easiest way to find it. I'm also over on Instagram at Still Loading Pod. And with Punch and Nazi Month coming to an end, just a reminder to donate to, as I said in the opening episode and the last episode, I am donating my Patreon money this month to the Trevor Project. So if you would also like to support that, don't support my Patreon monetarily. Just don't. I'm an unnecessary middleman. Go donate to the Trevor Project as well in honor of Punch Nazi Month, and please consider doing that. I think it's a good cause, and that's kind of like what this month is. I'm tying in with this month, but yeah. Go check that out. I'll have a link in the show notes to the Trevor Project's website. But anyway, if you want to support my show outside of that, please support the Trevor Project first. If you feel like it, you can support my show in a few different ways. That you can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use. It does help people find the show, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show over on Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights. It helps guide the direction of the show, and you can vote in quarterly polls, which you can help me choose games to pick to cover on the show, which I believe time this is coming out, the next one that is being chosen was Final Fantasy X-2, and that will be coming out sometime in the next few months, and who knows what the next poll will be. It'll be coming out next quarter, but that's all out. Just for $1 a month you get all of that. For $3 a month you get everything I mentioned prior, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month you get all of that stuff, plus 2 mini bonus episodes that I do every month. And for $5 a month you get everything. You get all of that extra content, all of the early access and the voting rights and everything. But you also get access to my monthly movie podcast, which at the time this episode comes out is called Still Family, my monthly Fast and Furious movie podcast, where all the guests who join me aren't just friends, they're family. And Diamond has been on that monthly movie podcast, but under the Still Bonding moniker. Diamond was on for both of Timothy Dalton's outings, The Living Daylights and License to Kill. So those are the longest episodes. I think both of them were above. License to Kill was 4.5 hours. I think Living Daylights was under 4, but either way, it was like 3.5 to 4. Lots of content. And only for $5 a month. What else are you going to do with that? There's so much content out there for that. So, yes, and when this is coming out, the most recent Fast and Furious movie one will be Fast 5 with Try from My Life in Gaming. So, yeah, that is all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But that's it. That is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Chris, Diamond, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you.
Good night.
And with all that said, listeners, go punch a Nazi.